Welcome to Business Mastery with Don Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. So if you have a business in one state and you're looking to go into another state, not just maybe selling online in another state, but actually going to another state, I have someone here who has built a regional and then a national company, and he's going to talk to us all about what we need to consider and how we can do it the best way that protects everybody involved. So, Curt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to this podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
Sure. Well, my name is Curt Moore. I'm the founder of Moat Title Security. Our headquarters are in Oklahoma City. We currently operate in 9 states, and we're plodding along to be operating in all 50 states with our business plan. Just briefly, we offer fraud protection products to effectively freeze property owners' title and the public records to protect them from fraud. We also offer a product that similarly protects property owners from squatters through a recorded document. We actively partner with title companies, real estate professionals, property management companies, and financial advisors. It's an interesting topic you bring up in crossing straight state lines. It's one thing to operate in Oklahoma and serve Oklahoma, but when you spread into Texas and Colorado and Florida and Arizona with a plan to get to all 50 states, there are certainly some things to be considered, and hopefully I can add some value to that conversation.
And I wanted to have this conversation with you, particularly because you deal with things that affect highly regulated transactions. Real estate transactions are not like you can go and pick it up off the floor or the Walmart shelf and then, check out with it. These are regulated all the way through. There's deed recording and all those things. And whatever part you're in that transaction, you have to be cognizant, if you will, of all the regulations in each of the states, which is why I thought this would be the perfect topic, because if you're not in such a highly regulated industry, you have the takeaway of understanding how you can do this. Maybe you won't have as much red tape, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of considerations, and for your industry particularly, it's tracked very carefully.
There. You're exactly right, Don. Again, if you're just operating in one state, you're going to obviously be familiar with and be registered with the Secretary of State of that state. Any state that you operate in, you're going to have to go through that step. Different states will make that more complicated than others. Some make it pretty easy. Some make it pretty difficult. There's different fees associated to become a foreign entity in a state, so that you can be recognized as the state as an entity that's proved to do business in the state. And then there's annual fees and different things going on. And as far as I can tell, there's about 50 different ways to do that. But generally speaking, when you stand up as a company that's headquartered in Oklahoma and you decide I want to do this in Texas too, you're going to have to get approved as a foreign entity in the state of Texas through the Secretary of State office. They're going to want to know your employer identification number for taxing purposes. There's generally some insurance requirements to show that you're a sturdy company and you're going to be able to handle the commerce that you're faced with. But you're exactly right. Depending on what type of business you're in, we are in the business of recording public documents. So recording a public document in Oklahoma County, Oklahoma is one thing. Recording a document in Tarrant County, Texas could be something different. The different counties have different expectations and requirements to record a document. Everything from it has to fit in this square to it has to be named something that they recognize, and I understand that. I think generally county offices across the United States are aligned on that, but there are some outliers that it can make it a little more difficult. But the names of our documents are notice of title freeze, notice of occupancy. You know, those are terminologies that counties generally understand. Recording a notice of something. It's so in our circumstances, that nomenclature is important so that you don't get wrapped around the back axle with a county clerk over. I don't know what this is, so I'm not sure if I should record it. So I guess my advice would be to your listeners is just be very mindful and take the necessary time to research and understand how your business is going to be perceived in the environment, business environment, whether it's another state or part of another state, and pick up the phone and call people if you're not certain. I've never contacted a Secretary of State office or a county clerk with questions and not found receptive parties willing to talk to you. They may not know all the answers, but they will generally try to direct you as best they can because generally they want you to do business where they're located. They're not trying to push business away, but they do want you to do business that conforms with their rules and regulations. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, you mentioned registering as a foreign entity with the Secretary of State. I just wanna make that really clear. So, just to walk people through it, right? So, your home base is Oklahoma. So, you are
Mhm.
considered domesticated, that's the terminology,
Hey,
domesticated in the state of Oklahoma. So,
yes.
you're not creating new LLCs in every state. So, I wanna make sure that's kinda clear to the listener. So, can you talk a little bit about what that process sort of looks like? What not necessarily the registration, but just how to consider and do the research because you could research the wrong thing and really get yourself into a ton of fees and a ton of requirements that you don't necessarily have to if you're actually just registering as a foreign.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess the easy answer to that is you probably need to get some legal advice. I certainly did. You know, generally speaking, and you bring up a good point. You mentioned you may not want to be an LLC in every state. Well, you may want to be, but in our circumstances, we're registered as Moat Title Security Incorporated. We are incorporated in the state of Delaware. We provide what's necessary for the state of Oklahoma to recognize our corporation through the state of Delaware. And then for each state that we tag on, our foreign entity name is also the same, Moat Title Security Company, which is a corporation in Delaware. Each state is going to want to know, well, who are you and what are you? We need to get our arms around, who you are, how to get a hold of you, how to make sure you stay compliant, make sure you pay your taxes. They have reasons why they need to know exactly who you are and how you're set up and how to get a hold of you. But in terms of how to set things up, I'm not an attorney. I don't want to try to practice law here, but I would say it, be consistent. I wouldn't want to set up Moat Title Security Incorporated in Oklahoma and then be an LLC in Wyoming and then be a corporation in Florida and be an LLC in New Jersey. It doesn't say Moat Title Security Company. It just says Moat Title Security. You can get yourself really confused in the eyes of your regulators if you're not consistent. So whatever strategy you pick, I would stick with the same strategy. And just before, sorry, that's the in my opinion, that's the most effective way to square yourself up for tax filings as well. The least layered and complicated you make that, the softer it's going to be on your CPA and your tax accountants to sort it all out at the end of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you talked a little bit about, of course, having your insurance, and you probably, because of what you do, have like a bond, right? And you have other things you have to do because you are dealing with public documents. But
Sure.
just generally, let's talk a little bit about this insurance because, there are some business policies that might exclude certain things that are done across state lines. You may have to have somebody local. How did you handle that? Because I do know for what you do in that regulatory environment, there's very specific things each state is gonna require to protect their own consumers.
That's a great question. It's that's a great question, and I'm a big believer of make sure you have the correct and correct amount and correct type of insurance for the business that you're engaged in. Whether you're in the services industry or you're in the construction industry or you're in the more of a business like Moat Title. I mean, we're not erecting buildings and we're not repairing people's plumbing and we're not on their land, so we're not going to slip and fall. So we have different insurance requirements. Ours is all about doing no harm and not having errors and omissions, not having misrepresentations. We use our terms of service in coordination with our insurance. Um, our construction of our insurance protocols, just to make sure people understand when I purchase a notice of title freeze, this is what it can do, and these are all the things that it can't do. It can deter someone from filing a fraudulent document, but it does not guarantee that someone could not do that. If you're familiar with the county clerk and recorder, if someone presents a document and it appears to be executed and notarized, and it's not, someone's laundry list or it's not something strange, they're obligated to record it. We believe we can deter that from happening, but we cannot absolutely prevent it. So we need to put those types of things in our terms of service, and then we can. If you freeze your title and someone records a fraudulent document, you can use what you've recorded ahead of their subsequently recorded document to seek a quiet title action and get it expunged from the records. But that doesn't mean you don't have to keep paying your mortgage, and it doesn't mean that you can stop paying your taxes. It's not freezing your title from those types of things. So we have to, insurance is all about, protecting yourself from risk. Insurance is all risk. And we also use our terms of service to just be clear about what a purchaser of a Moat Title Security product is getting versus what they might perceive they're getting, but that they may not be getting that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Definitely. And, your terms of service, do they have to vary in small ways, maybe between states? If you get, for example, the one that pops in my head is like you'll get a loan thing sent to you in the mail, or they send out those things, and if you flip it over on the back, because I often read them, because I don't know,
Yeah,
I'm a nerd. You flip it
yeah.
over on the back, it says this section doesn't apply if you live in these states, and this section applies if you live in those states. How did you find out what you had to or didn't have to include in different terms of service to be compliant in that one particular state, which to some people, especially business owners, might feel like it's maybe not a big thing. But if you overlook something like that, that can become a huge thing as far as
Yeah.
with transact business there.
That's another great question. And, I think where you see what you're describing is, the state of New Jersey may have a different view on lending and lending practices than, say, the state of uh, Florida. And I'm just making that up. I don't know if they do or they don't, but it's very possible that states have different requirements based on their experience with how commerce is occurring, and their legislatures can come up with legislative solutions, and they make that into a law, and then they have to follow it. In our in Moat Title Security's place, we don't have a big long history of consumer lending or, disclosures or things that can start to vary from state to state. In our experience, we're new. It's a new company. It's a new product line. It's not seasoned to a point where a state would come out and say, well, you need to make this disclosure in Colorado. Uh, in addition to your basic disclosures, we haven't bumped into that, and I don't believe our deck of products is likely to erupt that kind of a specific disclosure. But That's our circumstances. Your listeners should certainly consider what their circumstances might be, and make sure again if you're not sure and you're developing into that state of Delaware, and they may have very specific things that your listeners may need to accommodate and put in their disclosures. So just be very cognizant that well, one size does not fit all in the United States. There are states that come to mind that are just completely different. It's almost like different countries, quite frankly, compared to how you're doing something over here. It's pretty easy. You do this, you do that. It's all good, and you slide over to this state. And it's like, wow, it feels like we've not only crossed state lines, we've crossed into a different country. The different states are just structured differently, and good for them. I think that's one of the things that makes the United States so unique and special is states have a lot of control, and they can do as much or as little as they choose to do to protect their citizens. So just be aware of that and go in with your eyes open and learn what you need to learn. So there's two ways to do it. You can be prepared and do it right to start, or you can not be prepared and possibly do it wrong, and then you're going to get some kind of notice. And you're going to have to correct that, and you're going to have to going forward comply. So I would certainly lean to get it right the first time.
Yeah. Would you say the same thing about the contracts that you have with your people in different, even though they're buying a product from you, did you have to do anything specific as far as contracting went, in each of the different states? Because that's where I think, and I'll be honest, as far as the contract stuff goes, it's what you can do in this state. Maybe you have a business that's on the border town, so to speak, and you have a license in this state, maybe you have a license in that state, or, if home improvement or something like that, it's what has me thinking, or, Serve Pro, for example. I don't know if they're franchised, but, it's like you get a tornado, it goes across the state lines. The tornado did not go, "Oh, stop."
Yeah,
This is South Carolina, not North Carolina, right?
yeah,
So so there's,
yeah.
those potentials. Did you find, any contract language or any contract things that, made maybe some tweaks or some differences where it's like, "Nope, can't use this contract in that state?"
Another great question. You're full of great questions here, and yes, we did. We have our standard form notice of title freeze. And, again, the whole basis of that is just simply to say, hey, look, I own this property. Here's my name, here's the property address, here's a legal description. I'm worried about fraud. I'm worried that someone might record something fraudulent and harm me and my property. So I'm going to record this notice of title freeze that simply says nothing else should be recorded without my express recorded consent, which comes in the form of a release of this notice of title freeze. And if something is recorded without that, it's fraud. That sounds simple enough, and I think it is simple enough. We've worked very hard to make that a document that the average layman can understand and get their arms around and think, "Well, that makes sense." I want to proactively protect myself from someone who might try to do harm to me and my property. That w To answer your question, before we enter any state, we consider I've got a legal team, and they review the state statutes and look closely at state statutes in terms of title, fraud, and recording practices. And we just make sure that by recording this notice of title freeze in Florida versus recording it in Oklahoma, we're not recording something that's ambiguous to a state statute. And out of the 9 states that we're in so far, 3 of them, we've had to add some language to our document that just says, hey, look, by recording this document, and we'll just cite the state statute. It's in Oklahoma, Texas, and I think it's in, well, I can't remember the other, but there's 3 out of 9 states. If you recorded that, you could look at that from the state statute standpoint and say, well, which one's in charge here? Is the state what the state's trying to say about fraud important or more important than what Moat Title's saying? We just make a clear statement that says the owner chooses to have Moat's recording the govern if there's a question between what the state statute's saying about fraud and what they're saying about protecting themselves from fraud. So it's a great question, and again, it rolls right back to the very thesis of this podcast: is different states do things differently. Different states have already come up, and it's changes all the time. title fraud is unfortunately it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing every day, and different states are taking different actions to try to protect their citizens from it. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is coordinated with what states are doing rather than causing confusion. So, yeah, the contract side is something to consider as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the definitions between the states probably also can change a little bit. What we would consider over here to have this name and these things, like maybe, identity theft might over here be identity fraud unless you take an action to do something that it becomes all right. So to your point about each state being a little different, even the definitions could be different and would need to be scrutinized. And that could be whether you're in a highly regulated industry or not. If you don't understand what they mean by having XYZ, and you think you have it because you have it in your original state, you could run afoul of some regulation without even being aware.
Yeah, no, that's true. And in our circumstances, what we're doing is pretty new and innovative. And I can think of first time we started recording our documents in Florida, we had a county attorney just put a hold on it. Say, I just want to read this and understand what it is I've not seen this before. I want to basically do what you've already done and you claim you've done is consider our statutes and make sure you're not recording something ambiguous. And after about 2 days, he came back and said, yeah, you're good. This is cool. But I just wanted to make sure that once it's recorded, one of the most remarkable things about recording, there's no eraser.
Right.
Once it's recorded, it's in there, and the only way you can get it you can't get it out, but you can record something else that says, "That was a mistake," or, "Here's a new version of that," "Throw that one out, don't look at that one anymore, only look at this one," but that just makes complicated records, so I applaud, when we get that type of feedback just to make sure that the the county or we've had one state attorney general just, opine on it and say, "Yeah, I just wanted to read it and make sure I understand what you're doing." And make sure that it's good for our citizens. And yeah, you're good. But again, I just wanted to confirm and understand what's being recorded here because again, once it's in there, we can't erase it out.
Right, and exactly. I'm having horrible flashbacks to, wild deeds and chain of title discussions back in law school, so we'll get away from the property law.
Oh yeah.
Not my
No.
favorite. But again, highly regulated. You have to understand that if you can do business across 9 states, successfully with this highly regulated, then, a not so highly regulated business just needs to know that if you haven't considered these things before you, decide to break ground in a new place, these are the topics.
Uh,
They're not the fun topics, right? It's not as fun
well, no.
buying a domain with a new, state on it or adding a web page with a new state. These are the not fun topics, and for everybody listening, thank you for being here, and you're welcome that we
Yeah.
bring out the really dry and I don't mean dry in a bad way, but just, you're killing all the fun. What do you mean insurance, right? Because that's not the fun part of business for most of us. Uh,
No.
so but my next huh?
That's great. That's right. But I mean, you're going to, in my opinion, if you do your due diligence, you're right. It's not the most fun thing to do, but it's time worth spending because what you don't want to do is set up all your processes, link your CRM, do all these things, and then have someone, knock your apple cart over someday from a letter from a state saying, that you can't do it like this, call us. And then you're going to have to scramble and try to understand, well, where did I get off track? And they're going to have done their research and they're going to cite whatever they need to cite. It shows you where you're out of bounds. And then now you've got chaos. I would rather avoid that at all costs. So spend your time up front, understand. If you have questions, call, ask. This is what I'm trying to do. What do you think? What am I missing? Can you direct me to someone that might have an alternative opinion about any of this? Do it the best you can to set it up right the first time because tearing it down and rebuilding it is a lot worse. So I would certainly recommend avoiding.
Right. It's I think obvious if you have employees in different states that there's the labor law stuff, and I think it's obvious there's tons of HR people that are experts at navigating those things, but these things that you and I are talking about are the
Yeah.
ones that I think get overlooked the most because, um, there it's just not necessarily considered. Now, my next question is, are there states that you looked at, saw the statutes and said, "Oh, that's going in phase 4 versus phase 1 or 2," based on what you saw the requirements were either for registering a foreign and then getting the insurance and,
Yeah.
looking at those things, were there certain states that gave you a little pause? And if there were, let's share that too, because even though the state next door might look great, maybe it's not. I had a franchise consultant on a couple of years ago, and they were like, "No, there's red, green states, or the red states, yellow states, green states, where is it easy to sell a franchise versus where is it really hard to sell a franchise?"
Yeah.
And, I hadn't really thought too much about that because you see McDonald's, right? So
Sure.
but that
Sure.
was that was a good conversation, but now we're talking about not buying a franchise, an existing business that people know, talking
Yeah.
about going out there and Lewis and Clarkin, if you will, into new territory.
Yeah.
So how did you decide on the 9 states that you did, and were there states that gave you pause?
That is a great question.
Full up to date.
And yeah, no, and I'm already saying there's a lot going on in that question. So let me try to break it down. Yes, we do have a method to our madness of the states that we're in and why we're in them. But we also have what I call a matrix of how we want to go to state 10, 11, 12, and on out through 50. And there are considerations for each state. But primarily, our products are pointed towards a certain demographic. It certainly works across a larger demographic, but it's generally pointed at more elderly homeowners, property owners with more valuable property. So, and generally those that demographic may have a second home or a vacation home, which is also a huge risk for title fraud and for squatters. And they may even have a real estate portfolio. They may invest in property. So, where does that happen most? So we're trying to swing into, Arizona, Texas, the southeast side, Florida, and then we're moving up north along the eastern seaboard, up through the middle, and then eventually we're going to move up the west coast. But again, great question. There are certain things in different states that are going to make it more ornery, more costly, and more difficult to enter. So, as a startup company, I think you need, in my opinion, one of our views is let's test this thing. Let's not start on the slippery slope we can possibly find in the United States and see if we fall. Let's try to start somewhere we can have a good chance to get ourselves stabilized, get our website stabilized, get our marketing stabilized, get our CRM linked to the website, and all the bugaboos worked out of that. And then, I think we can start climbing up the tree for the higher branches. And you brought up franchises. We do have a long-term plan at some point to franchise mode. It's not our mode right now. We operate out of a headquarters here across state lines, but without having franchises. But it makes a lot of sense to, when you think about it, to have local representation, and I agree with whoever you were talking to. There are certainly red, yellow, and green things to concern yourself with franchising. So when we get 2, 3 years out, and that becomes a step, we'll have to be very diligent and very mindful and very wide open eyed, understanding of what's it like to be a franchise in California versus what is it like to be a franchise in Texas. It couldn't be different. They could not be more different. Texas is basically, tell us your name and give us a fee and you're it. California is, way more requirements. Show us this, show us that, give us all this, give us all that. Every year we want audited books. Every year we want these things, and from $25, and that may not be the right number, but a very nominal fee in one state to probably thousands of dollars of annual cost to maintain that franchise. Your listeners, if that's your goal, be very, very wide open eyed to look at. what are those requirements, and are you up for that? And to get your books audited, it's probably 10,000 or more, depending on your books and the condition of your books and the style of your books. You could get yourself into some real wild requirements before you're in a cash flow steady state that makes sense to take that on. So again, it's a great question. Each one of these states is its own thing, and they have their own rules, they have their own regulations, they have their own view on how commerce occurs within their borders, and how they're going to regulate that, how they're going to promote that, how they're going to you know keep 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 control of that. And it's your job to understand that before you enter those states and be compliant.
Would you say that you chose the state you did because of the demographic of your end client more than the regulatory environment you're entering in, or did they both kind of weigh equally when you opened, 2359?
I think they both played in, but at the end of the day, if I'm trying to sell uh, glasses, or it's some product that is needed somewhere, I'm going to have to go where they are.
Mhm.
Uh, so ideally, we'd like to be in states that are less complicated to operate in, but still are target-rich environments for our target market. And that's generally what we're doing here in our early stage development. I think later on, we'll get into states that don't have as much of our target market in them and may or may not have even more complicated regulatory structures that we'll have to manage. So we wouldn't want to start on that side of the spectrum. We want to start on states that have some prevalence of our target market and are not the most not complicated and expensive states to operate in. Just to get ourselves set up. I mean, I keep talking to the team. I mean, we've got so many tests to do. We've got so many things to test, so many things to um, learn about what are people's thoughts when they're engaging a conversation about freezing their title. The average person, I've lived in 6 homes in my life. I'm nearly 60 years old, so as an adult, that's a home, that's a switch about every 5 to 7 years, you know? So what do I know if I'm not in this business? What do I know about title? What do I know about closings? What do I know about public recordings? I think the average person who just has a lot of questions about that because they don't interact with it very often. So it's important for us to put ourselves in their position and understand, people are concerned about fraud. It is everywhere. You cannot watch the TV. You cannot be on social media. You can't look at anything without something screaming out in bold red letters, fraud. So I think people are genuinely concerned about it. They just want to make sure that they're not being frauded as part of protecting themselves from fraud.
Yeah.
Um,
The
so,
phishing
and
emails, I mean, it's everywhere. You are 100 text messages, right?
yeah,
Pay your ticket.
it
I think there was a text message that said you paid the ticket and it wasn't
yeah,
even from the state that you were into.
yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
And a classic example, it'll be too far off the tracks here, but my wife's mother is older, and, she is, terrified when she gets these crazy emails and these crazy text messages and these crazy phone calls. And she will call my wife, usually late at night, say, "I just got this text message, I didn't know I was even in the state of Illinois, and, they got a ticket and they're gonna arrest me." It's like, "No, no, 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 no. That is complete nonsense. Just calm down." If there is truly something going on, that's not how they would interact with you. They're not going to come at you with a threatening text message.
Yeah.
But, people that do these things, I call them the bad guys, they don't care. They just don't care. They don't care who they're attacking, who they're hurting, who they're scaring. If they can, attack 100 people and get 1 or 2 people to send them a check or do a credit card transaction, they win because they're doing this by the thousands, and it's a numbers game too. So be very careful with this fraud thing. That is a good message here and embedded in your podcast.
Definitely. And, again, this leans into why the states also want to be so careful about who's coming in and doing commerce.
Yeah.
because, being able to cross state lines and set up a business and maybe not have the best interests of the consumers in mind. So, on the flip side of we receive maybe a ton of fraudulent sorts of phishing things or whatever, but the state itself also, if the state lets something through,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
if somebody is not insured and they're operating,
Yeah.
there's a ton of risk, I would say also, not just to the end user of the state, but the state itself.
Yeah.
Um, is it's like, why did you let them operate here, right? Like, why did you let this happen?
Oh,
So
yeah, I think
I can see
yeah,
that.
I think you see that in some states now with some, federal fraud going on,
Yeah.
and I just think you're gonna have lawsuits. I think you're gonna have people sue because that's, a reaction in our society, and if someone is harmed by that, they're gonna take action, and, the state is going to have to defend that, and say, "Well, how did that happen here?" And they're just gonna have to, explain, that, so they should be not just for that reason, and I'm sure they're not just for that reason, but that I would think if I was in the business of considering and approving, new entities to do business, in my state, I would certainly wanna make sure this is legitimate. The products or the services they're selling are, legitimate, and they're not harmful to our citizens, and the practices are not harmful. This is a benefit to our state. I think there's probably some matrix they've got to make sure that things are they're not going to get themselves the worst case scenario is they're going to let something in and it hurt somebody and they get sued. So let's at least start with that not being what we want, and then try to drive it up the ladder towards great company, legitimate business, good for our citizens, and insured, properly controlled companies in our borders.
Yeah. What a great point. And, that just kind of takes it full circle. So I'm really glad that we were able to look at it from both sides, because if you are listening in and you are a company that is either considering moving into another state, or, you're maybe operating in 2 or 3 states and maybe you're looking at doing more, um, you know, depending on the states and where they are, geographically moving into certain states, to your point, maybe a little bit easier, as far as the regulatory landscape goes. But just to kind of sum up, Secretary of State, insurance requirements, contract requirements, any disclosure requirements, website requirements, making sure that your I's and T's and your punctuation and grammar is correct,
Yeah, yeah.
to make sure that, you're doing all the things. And, this is a very important conversation to have, even though, again, it's probably not the one when people are like, we're going to expand into another state, and they're looking out at office space and leases, and they're not looking at registering that entity,
Yeah.
as the first step. Maybe the regular, maybe we press a little pause after this conversation and we make sure that we're doing all of those things, before, we sign the lease. So, critically
Yeah, you're
important.
yeah, very well said. Very, very great summary. And I kind of harken it back to my prior career. I had 30 years in the oil and gas industry, and sometimes you just have to look at things from, well, how would we have done this when I was rowing in that boat every day? I mean, there certainly are people like, oh, we should do this acquisition over here. Everything's excited about that, but there's usually someone else at the table saying, well, I used to operate, and that you got to remember that is this really complicated regulatory environment. There's all kinds of geological risk. It's nice to have a balance. It's nice to have all the bright lights and shiny objects, flashing all over the place, but it's also nice to back up and say, what are all the entanglements that we might face, and what are all the challenges we have to go through, and what are the costs, both to enter and to remain operating in there. Should we weigh all that out? I think we should. And when we weigh all that out, should we compare it to state 2 or 4 or 10? And maybe 4 is the next best state to go. And because it's maybe not as shiny, but it's shiny enough, and it doesn't have all these other things that are going to wear us out every day. While we learn how to do 4 a little better, then we'll start getting towards 1, 2, and 3. it's just a balancing act. Everything that seems like when you're an entrepreneur and when you're trying to build a business and build a product and deliver it into the market and get some energy around it and expand into multiple states. I mean, there's just constantly a balancing act of what's my next best decision right now. What is going to do the next best thing for this company? And it is very tempting sometimes to chase shiny objects, but I just recommend balancing them out with considering the full scope of what you're intending to do to make sure it's fully known before you jump in.
Fantastic. So where can people find you? I know, you again, you have product suite and you're selling particular products, but where could they find you? Could they follow you on LinkedIn? Where could people watch more of your journey? A fly just came in here. So
Sure. Sure. Well,
yeah.
our website, yeah. Our website is moattitleSecurity.com. And we actually just went through that website and redeveloped it. And it needed a new freshening. So we think it's a lot better form, informational. We're dropping some informational videos on there about our products. We hope it's a very informative, interactive website. But what we're not trying to do on that wobsite is sell somebody something. And we're just trying to say, hey, look, here's something you might want to be concerned of, especially if you're in our target market. We expect you to have questions. We don't expect you to grab your credit card and spill out all your information and buy something after spending a few minutes on our website. We want to engage you. We want to answer your questions and just see if these products are right for you. And so that's where you can reach us. I've done a ton of podcasts. We put a ton of those on the website.
Great.
So we are on social media. It's to honor our target market. It's not our biggest place to introduce ourselves. You think about, like, for instance, my wife's mother. She's certainly in the target market. She's not spending any time on social media. We do have a presence, but I would say that's the website's probably the best place to learn more about Kurt.
Okay, perfect. So we will put that down inside the show notes. And if you find this the day it releases or 2 years later, you'll still be able to find the information and make that connection. And I thank you so much for discussing this. And again, in your industry, you are the perfect person to, kind of run through this. And for a lot of the audience, again, even the most seasoned entrepreneurs, when you have an opportunity to maybe do something, it's very exciting. And then somebody says, "Do you have insurance?" And you're like, "Wah wah." So
Yeah.
that we're talking about this all up front because I think it sets that expectation of what has to happen first. So I appreciate it. And thanks for all of your generous time.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the challenging questions. It was a very good exchange. I very much appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. We'll talk to you all next time on the next episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to DawnKKennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.